All right, all right. Good afternoon, everyone. We're starting nice and early and on time. Not early, on time, 1:30 p.m. Good to see you all. Today is Wednesday, February 15th, 2023. My name is Tina Patterson. I'm the principal attorney of the Patterson Justice Council, which is a law firm here in Detroit. We focus primarily on probate and estate planning and also civil litigation as it pertains to your rights and your property. And today we're going to be talking about risks and rewards. The greater the risk, the greater the reward. The greater the reward, the greater the risk. And we'll see how they relate to timing and when to make these moves. Because I think a big misconception when it comes to any legal action, facing any legal action, taking any legal action, contemplating any kind of legal action is that you have to avoid risks at all times. And even lawyers themselves are really trained to be more risk avoidant. However, any decision in life, whether it's a legal decision, a big family decision, a business decision, a career, education, it doesn't matter. Any decision is going to have a risk and a reward. And it's all about what your objective is and what your risk tolerance is, yes, but usually the greater the risk, the greater the reward. And it goes both ways, whether you do it upfront or whether you do it on the back end. And we're going to talk through that here today. So I just want to give a little context about what the discussion is going to be. So the greater the risk, the more you lose upfront, the greater the reward, the more potential to gain on the back end. And then the greater the quote unquote reward, meaning the more that you keep upfront, the greater the risk is, the more potential to lose on the back end. So when it comes to legal actions, a lot of times people think they're safe. They think about saving time, saving money, and they think they're going to save stress with that. But usually, when they try to save time and money up front, the stress compounds on the back end because they never put enough energy into making the legal action go away or avoiding the risk of the legal action. So it just accumulates on the back end and it ends up costing even more time, even more money to take care of whatever that action is. Okay, so I'm going to go through a few stories and examples and give you three things to think about when talking about risk and reward. And just to kind of say that again, so when we're talking about risk and reward, we need to put it in the context of time. When are you taking these actions? Okay. So if you're talking about a greater risk, meaning you lose upfront, maybe it's going to cost you some money. Maybe it's going to cost you some time. It's going to cost something that is valuable to you right now in the present. Okay. So that's the risk. You're going to lose something right now. But that means the greater the reward on the back end, the greater the reward in the future, the more potential you have to gain on the back end. So let's just take it out of a legal context for a minute because I'm going to give you some stories that have that. But let's say we're talking about something like getting a degree, going to school, even starting a business. It's going to cost money up front. You're going to have to pay tuition. You're going to have to pay for books, maybe room and board. Obviously, you can get a full ride, and please, rejoice if you do. But you still have to do something that's going to cost. It's going to cost time. If anything, it's going to cost time, maybe at least 4 years. If you go to law school like I did, 4 years plus three, at least 3 years extra on top of that. So 7 years altogether. If you're going to be a doctor, 10 years or so. So there's always going to be some kind of risk up front. But what is the reward going to be later on? So if we're talking about in the context of a career, the reward is going to be, I'm going to be in this professional status. I'm going to, make X amount of money. That's more than what I would have spent in the 7 to 10 years that I'm in school. If it's starting a business, maybe I have to pour in my savings into the business up front. But guess what? I can make all that money back. It's going to come back on the back end when I start to sell my product, sell my service, and my business takes off. Okay. And so there's always going to be that potential. You're always going to be wrestling with what you want to, what you're comfortable with, I guess. And, even comfort, we don't want to go there, but what you're going to need to risk up front, what you're going to need to be putting in up front to get something greater on the back end. Okay. But a lot of people sometimes have kind of the opposite mindset, and even lawyers sometimes too. Again, trained to be really risk avoidant, but you don't need to be risk avoidant. You need to be risk managing. Okay. So there are some things that when we talk about comfort level that you might not be comfortable doing fine, right? Don't go outside of that, but just understand why you're taking that action. Again, come down to objective. So the flip side of that is the greater reward, the greater that you keep up front. So let's say, I'm not going to go to school. I'm not going to spend that time. I'm not going to spend that money. I'm not going to start that business. So the greater that you keep up front that you already have, the greater the risk is, the more potential you have to lose on the back end. So if we're talking about these same examples we just gave, the greater the risk, or excuse me, the greater the reward. Let's say you just stay at your comfortable job that you're getting paid, let's say even $20 an hour for. That's okay. But are you happy? Are you satisfied? Are you fulfilled? Is there still something burning inside of you that says, you know what, this is not what I want to do. I'm just doing this to maintain, right? But you're still afraid to take the greater risk of leaving that comfort zone to go for something bigger because you don't know what the reward is going to be on the back end. It's going to be unclear sometimes. It's going to be shaky. It's going to be filled with its difficulties. But what's your objective in getting out of it, right? Are you imagining something greater that is not being fulfilled right now, right? The only potential to achieve that would be to lose what you have to gain something greater. Okay. And so a lot of people are just scared of that. They think that they need to keep everything now. But when you keep everything now, you just keep what you have ultimately. Okay. You don't really get the chance to explore anything bigger and greater. So that's where we're going within this context. And it pertains particularly to legal situations, to legal actions. And we're going to get into our stories. But before we get into our stories, I want to give you three tools to use to kind of assess how to manage these risks and rewards. Okay. So the three tools we're going to use: the first one, audit our assets; the second one, analyze our actions; and the third one is to accept able assistance. Okay. Audit our assets, analyze our actions, accept able assistance. And I have a story for each one. So we'll get into the first story when it comes to auditing our assets. And I kind of call it no will, no way. So some years back, maybe 20 years back or so, this was even before I began law school. I was in college, but I was aware of this situation, and it just always stuck with me. As I became a lawyer, this case never went away, so to speak. So I knew a single parent who passed away at a very young age, mid-40s, left a minor child. And, it was a devastating situation. And obviously, with a situation like that, the welfare of the child is most important, right? That's the life you want to protect now that there is no life to protect that one. And so probate, which is right, going to court when someone passes away, but it's also going to court when there's minors involved and you're talking about their care. Okay, so there was a probate case for someone to gain custody and become the official guardian of the child, who was about 12 or 13 years old at the time. That happened, and that's good, right? That's the primary objective. That's fine. But I said audit our assets, because audit means you're searching around for everything that you have out there. You're going through what you owe, what is valuable to you, what could be a liability, what could be something that can use as leverage. So you have to go through it all. Don't kind of rush through. Get the main things correct, yes, but don't miss anything, because you could be missing something important. So the thing that was missed in this case was the property. Okay. So there was a home that was owned by this parent. And even though there was a probate case to secure the custody of the child, there was never a probate case to secure custody of the property, to secure ownership of the property. Okay. And so when that happens, and nobody's claiming the home, that means nobody's paying the taxes. Okay. So what happened was this home ended up being foreclosed because there was no one there to take care of the home. There was no one there to take care of the taxes. There was no one there to claim it. So it foreclosed. It when a home forecloses like that and there's no probate, it'll usually go back into the hands of the state, okay, into the hands of the government. So that's what happened. And let me show you a picture of why that can, a picture and then a realization of why that can be so dangerous. So I'm not sure if you can see it clearly, but that's an empty lot there. And there would have been a home there, but it was demolished. The home in the same case was demolished. And the child, 20 years later, obviously is a grown individual with their own family. and had to go out and try to find their own house to purchase, right? Which is a financial burden. Imagine if the home would have been kept along with the child to take with the child, how much less of a financial burden that would have been, right? But again, sometimes we think that we're doing the right things and we don't need to kind of manage other issues, or we can just leave them on the back burner. But this is the risk involved, right? A greater reward would have been to also secure the home. And then that would have been the child's home, even if the child didn't keep the home for his or herself. They could have had equity in the house, use that to fund any purchases they needed to, etc. I mean, it's a big asset that was just wasted away. So that's why I said audit our assets. That's number one when we talk about this concept of managing risk and managing reward. Audit our assets. Okay. Number two, analyze our actions. Okay, so this kind of goes along with the concept of we think we're saving money, we think we're saving time up front, or we think we don't have the capacity to spend the money and time that we need. So we just kind of play the wait and see game, and we just let whatever happen. So there's been so many cases like this, but one I have in particular from just a few years ago in my own practice. There was an individual who had been served with some paperwork that means that they were being sued for an issue. And they consulted with my office about it because they finally got a set of questions that they needed to respond to. And I got it. I looked at it. It looked incomplete. So I said, can you send me the entire file? Because even the questionings were kind of missing. And when I saw it, what ended up happening was this was like the third or fourth set of questions that had gone out. But I was able to do a deep dive of the case and see that, there's not even a point in responding in this way because there's already been an action taken against this individual. So the whole time during the case, the individual didn't respond, didn't submit anything in their own defense, never hired a lawyer, thinking that they couldn't afford it. But what ended up happening was there was a judgment issued for $10,000. Okay. Analyze our actions. Again, we think we are making the right move for us because we're in that comfort zone of, well, I can't afford it. I'm just going to see how it goes. Or, well, I'm just going to take the wait and see approach, or whatever the reason is, and I'm not saying it's a good or bad reason. I'm just telling you that these are real life issues of kind of what happens when you sit on the fence or when you improperly manage, I'll say, risk and reward. So in this case, the risk would have been the risk upfront, right? Would have been maybe paying for an attorney in your defense, or even just trying to submit something on your own behalf. It would have taken time to do that, even if you didn't spend any money on it. The reward would have been potentially owing lesser in the amount, or potentially not having the case being ruled against you at all, potentially dismissal, depending on what kind of legal strategy you use. So that would have been the reward on the back end. Now let's go back to the reward on the front end. The reward on the front end, you keep your money, you keep your time. That simple. But what do you lose? Well, you end up losing $10,000. And that's only one case. I've seen another case in almost the exact same scenario a few years back. Nobody answered the case. There was no lawyer for anybody on the case. There was no appearances, nothing. And it was a couple. And they ended up losing $100,000 because they had a judgment issued against them right away. So when those facts happen, sometimes what can happen is a default can be issued. That means that, hey, you must have been not guilty, but you must have been liable for what they're coming after you for. So we're just going to enter the order in their favor, and you owe whatever it is they're asking for. So I've seen it range from $10,000 to $100,000. Again, what is the risk? What is the reward? And how are you managing them? So that's analyzing your actions. So once you audit your assets, you see what you're working with, you see what's at stake, and you don't leave anything out, then you analyze your actions. You got to do something or something's going to happen to you. Then the third point, and I'll end with this story. The third point is accepting able assistance. And I say able assistance because you don't need to be going to a car mechanic when you need your sink fixed, right? They have to be able to help you in this situation. You need to get a car mechanic for a mechanic issue for your car. You need to get a plumber for the sink, right? If you have a legal issue, you need to get a lawyer for it, but also a lawyer who can handle that legal issue. Okay. So very important to make that distinction. Or a doctor. If you have a heart problem, you don't want to see a foot doctor, you want to see a heart doctor. Okay, a heart specialist. So accepting able assistance. And I have two quick stories to share with this one. Both about kind of taking the DIY approach. So they audited their assets, they knew what was at stake. They analyzed their actions, meaning they did take some action, right? They didn't just kind of wait around for the wait and see approach. But accepting able assistance, this is what was missed. They just kind of tried to do it on their own. And these are big, high stakes assets on the line. So in the first case, there was an individual who had a parent that was losing their mental sufficiency, losing their mental capacity. And they had some paperwork done, power of attorney paperwork, so that one of the parents' children could be the agent that would look after the parent and make medical decisions on behalf of the parent. That was done before the parent lost pretty much all capacity, okay? But it was DIY. It was done incorrectly. So the signatures didn't match up and there was some language missing, okay? It was done incorrectly. It wasn't sufficient. It wasn't valid. It wasn't effective and accepted. Now, what is the risk here with this, okay? So the reward was, they kept some of the money up front because obviously they didn't pay for an attorney to properly look over it. They kind of did it themselves. But the risk is now there was a home, again, another house. There was a home at stake that was they were trying to sell. They couldn't sell it because nobody had the authority to do it. It was owned by the parent, who at this point now had lost all of it. In fact, the parent needed to be taken to a mental care facility. Even then, it was a challenge trying to move the parent into this facility because there was no one to sign paperwork, etc. Right? There's just hassle. And that's one thing we don't even consider, is just the hassle and the stress that comes along with all of the issues that we're facing when we're trying to do it by ourselves. And we don't have what we need in place to get it done. The hassle and the stress alone is worth whatever amount it costs on the front end to get it done. Because it really pains me when I see families who are now trying to consult with me and see what their options are at this point, because so many options have already been taken off the table, right? Just from either trying to do it themselves and not going along the right way, or not doing anything. And now it's like, it's the final hour and there's only so much I can do for you in that final hour, right? So if we have 24 hours in a day, you've used up 23 of them trying to do it on your own. And I only have this 1 hour left. There's not much I can work with on that, right? As a professional, this is my own opinion. Whereas if we had the whole 24 hours, there's a lot we can go with that, okay? And that's accepting able assistance. Sometimes you just got to bite the bullet and do it. And the second story is along the same veins. There was an individual who also executed a power of attorney, was going out of town. This person had, sufficient capacity, etc., but they were traveling. So they did a power of attorney online, again, do it yourself, and named an adult child, to be the person who would take care of their affairs. However, again, this one had very specific, crucial language that was missing, the exact language that would make the power of attorney effective. Okay, there's, in the state of Michigan where I'm licensed to practice, there's very specific language you must have in the document or else it's no good. And this document was missing that language. And so what happened? The house couldn't be sold. The house couldn't be sold. And this was some years back, but let me just give you a quick picture here. This is from Rocket Homes, which is a big mortgage company here in the state. Average home price in Detroit right now is $81,878. So that's just the average. That's not home by home. And depending on what area, it could be a lot more than that. But if we just take that average price, $80,000 is on the line. You can't get access to $80,000, right? If you're trying to sell the house, and let's say you owe the mortgage and it's half, $40,000 is still a lot of money you can't get access to, because your reward was keeping what you had already, right? Keeping your money, keeping your time, not getting the appropriate assistance, but you lose so much more on the back end. All right. So again, when it comes to managing risk and reward, it's not just about what you're going to spend right away, or the time right up front. I know a lot of people are intimidated, or they're just unaware, right, of the process and talking through it with an attorney, etc., or they just don't trust it. A lot of people just don't trust it, and that's okay. But that's something you got to manage again, because there's going to be something. If there's something in motion, it has to go somewhere, and you want to be the one to try to manipulate it into your favor as much as possible, right? As long as you're acting in good faith. I'm going to say that here. What we do is not to manipulate or to engage in anything deception, any deception. All right. But if you're acting in good faith, right, these are all people who just are going through everyday situations. They're losing family. Family is losing health, right? They're trying to protect their kids, whatever it is. They're trying to protect their property, but there are just missteps along the way, really easy fixes that can be incorporated so that you can have a better outcome, okay? So that you can try to sway the situation more in your favor. And guess what? A lot of this stuff can be done outside of court, without court approval or authority or administration. And that's what you want to do, because that can just be so much more of a burden than you are looking forward to. And that's when it can really cost a lot more money, because there's a lot more work for the lawyer to do. Okay, whereas many of these things could have been taken care of on the front end without going to court. Sometimes, yes. When it comes to appointing a guardian for a child, yes. Okay, that's going to have to go to court. When it comes to an estate that doesn't have a will, then yes. Okay, and that's the first example I gave you. But a lot of other stuff, just getting the paperwork correctly, that can be done outside of court. Even with a lawsuit being faced, if you get an attorney, there can be a settlement that doesn't have to be a lengthy court process, So these are the kinds of options that you're giving up when you keep upfront. All right, again, risk and reward. The greater you risk, the more you kind of lose upfront. We're talking about time, money, property, whatever it is. The more you lose upfront, the potential you have for a greater reward on the back end. And then the reverse is true. The greater reward, the stuff you already keep upfront, the greater your risk, your potential to lose on the back end. Okay, so that's the video for today. Thank you for tuning in. I will see you again next week, same time, same place. Okay, Wednesday, February 22nd, 1:30 p.m. We're going to be live here every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. So if you like this video, go ahead and like it, share it, subscribe it with your network, and I will see you next week. Okay, thanks again. Bye.